No, he was here today.
Joe, how are you? I'm okay. My voice is a little weak, but other than that, are you running the show?
Yeah.
Yeah. When's the show end? How long are we at? Okay. Oh, thank you. Yeah. So just work on it a little bit.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you all for being here. Appreciate everybody's patience and flexibility as we worked in through some additional interest this morning. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Joe Murphy. I'm the Senior Vice President for Government Relations and Public Policy here at the Partnership. I'm here today to welcome you to our Candidate Forum Series event. Today is our last candidate in our series event, and on behalf of the Partnership team, I thank you for attending today, and also thank you for attending our previous 6 forums. As many in this room know, the Greater Des Moines Partnership is a nonpartisan, non-political organization. We do not endorse candidates, and we do not operate or fund a political action committee. The purpose of the forums is to provide a thoughtful, civil discussion on the issues important to our state and our region. We've had great success over the last 6 forums, but I'd like to take a moment right now to remind our audience to be respectful and civil during today's candidate forum. If you've attended our forums in the past, you know that you've heard me say before that the Partnership does not allow videoing of the candidates or the forums unless you are a registered member of the media, and we do not allow any signage as well. So thank you in advance for your cooperation and your respect on that. With that in mind, I'd now like to welcome Tim Kuhn to the podium to introduce our speaker. Tim is the 2018 chair of the Partnership's Government Policy Committee. Tim.
Thank you. Again, thank you all for coming today. We're pleased to welcome Congressman Steve King. Before we introduce the Congressman, I'd like to take a moment to remind everyone of the importance of civility in today's event. Advancing meaningful conversation requires civility. We urge all Iowans to be respectful of this election season as they express their opinions about issues and candidates. We want to run a very smooth event today. As we always do, the Partnership is committed to having open discourse with policymakers to further economic development and quality of life improvement in central Iowa. I encourage everyone to continue to be and conduct themselves in that way. With that, I'm pleased to welcome Congressman King to the podium. Of Karen, he was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in 2002. He represents Iowa's 4th Congressional District and serves on the Ag, Small Business, and Judiciary Committees. Please welcome Congressman King to the podium.
Thanks, Tim. Well, thank you, Tim. Thanks for the invitation to the Des Moines Area Partnership and the chance to be here today to have this conversation. First, I'll start off with that. I would apologize for my voice, but I made a resolution not to apologize for the things I can't control. And it might be a good time for me to do that, by the way. So I want to run through just a few things that are part of the priorities that we've worked on over the years. And yes, I've served the United States Congress for 16 years, 6 years in the Iowa Senate. And I love the work of the Iowa Senate. They're doing great work for us there, as the Iowa House is. They have the network of government that we have in this state, from my view, and policies that people that align with me care about, is the best I believe that it's ever been. And I'm very pleased that the state legislature was able to take the legislation, the heartbeat bill that I wrote, and take it through the Iowa Senate. And they said that I was there about a little too much, helping to push that bill through the House. But I'm very glad the governor signed the heartbeat bill. And I have a bill in Congress that I brought in 2 years ago. It's 174 co-sponsors on it and 163 national organizations. There's only one national organization or leader that has not signed on yet to support the bill. It's the strongest support there's ever been for pro-life legislation. It saves more lives than any legislation that's been brought this far in the history of it since 1973 or Roe versus Wade. But some of the things that we've accomplished, maybe I'll move back through history just a little bit. I don't have to look very far back. October 19th, I'll delve back in history earlier. When I was nominated for this job the first time for the 2002 election, I stood before people then and said, if you elect me for this job, I'll do a couple of things. One is I'll burn the candle at both ends. And when I run out of wax, I'll come home. I had no idea how much wax was in my candle. But we all know this, there's still wax there. It's burning today, and it's burned every day. And the second thing was that I set up 2 infrastructure priorities. One of them was dredge Storm Lake. I wrote the op-ed back in about 1991. That's a matter of record today. To dredge 1,600 acres out of the middle of that down to 4 meters and sock it down to 24 feet and cut a trough in the middle. We have substantially accomplished that. I had lunch with the mayor, the longtime mayor of Storm Lake, John Cruz. We're happy that we've gotten that project there. Second thing, just a few days later, went over and personally and with Lieutenant Governor Adam Gregg, who used to be my intern, the 2 of us had our hands on those big old wooden scissors and cut that ribbon on 4-lane Highway 20. And now you can drive from Dubuque to Sioux City on a 4-lane highway. It is a tremendous accomplishment. It started 60 years ago. It's now done. And I also think about how when we were sitting back in those days when our grain markets were lousy and was what are we going to do? We're faced with a farm crisis. Sitting around kitchen tables in northwest Iowa, we began putting together plans to build not only ethanol plants but an industry. And it took capital, it took engineering, it took politics, and of course the vision of the people that put their money and their engineering on the line. Today, we have the strongest network in renewable fuels in the 4th Congressional District. Is the #1 renewable fuel producing congressional district in all of America. It didn't get there by accident, and didn't get there by me alone, but I've been there with them step by step all the way. If you haven't lived it, you don't understand it. Then also, a point that probably won't come up here, I want to put a little commercial in and invite you all out to Glen Oaks Country Club tonight at 6 o'clock, where we're doing an event out there. It's a fundraiser for STEM, which is driven and run by Dr. Steve Meyer, an orthopedic surgeon who spends half of his life in Tanzania and has for 20 years. He's been a friend of mine for over 20 years. And we'll be out there celebrating the lives of the Tanzanian miracle kids. These are the 3 survivors of a bus wreck that crashed in Tanzania in early May of 2017. I was on a trip into the Balkans at that time. Dr. Meyer called me and said, I need a miracle. 35 are dead, 3 are alive. They're going to be dead in a few days if I can't get them to America. And he said, you got to do a few things for me. He said, the Mercy Hospital will take care of all the costs, and I just need to get them there. He said, I'll do all the surgery work. All of that will be on the house, but you got to get them there for me, and they need passports and they need visas. So I called a mutual friend of ours, Lazaro Nyalandu, who was a candidate for prime minister in Tanzania, and said, you need to expedite these passports, Lazaro. And I called our embassy, and I used Lazaro's name, and kind of opened the door to get the visas going, but it took about 3 or 4 days to get a plane. And I dialed, I'll say, scores of people and sent out the network. And finally, Reverend Franklin Graham said, I'm going to DC-8 and I'll fly them back to Iowa for you, out of Tanzania. He did that. And Marilyn and they all 3 lived. And Marilyn and I were there to greet them when they arrived back on their home tarmac at Kilimanjaro Airport, August 18th of 2017. The best day of that year, maybe the best day of my life. We're going to celebrate that victory. I'm not alone in this. Dr. Meyer is the linchpin, and it was a chain of miracles. And I got to shape one link in that chain of miracles. And that story will be told out there tonight. We've got a book out there for you, and we're trying to turn this into a movie. It's a tremendous story about the compassion of Iowans and what you can do from the private sector, what you can do from your hearts, and what you can do from faith. So that's some of the things to run through that have been important. We've got a farm bill sitting there that needs to be finished, and of course I'm pushing to get it done. We were able to write a lot of that language into the base bill, especially Iowa State's provisions that they wanted in a low-key way. That's always the best way to get that done in a farm bill. I put an amendment on the floor that lets us use EQIP funding in drainage districts as well as in irrigation districts. That will help a lot for reasons that are too long to explain here in this forum. And also my amendment down there, which is equivalent to a bill called the PICA Amendment, Protect Interstate Commerce Act. Right now, California is locking any eggs out that were laid by hens that aren't in an approved cage by some California inspector in Iowa. That can't happen. They're locking our Iowa ethanol out of California. That can't happen. It's also happening with pork from sows raised in gestation crates or veal raised in stalls. So they are regulating interstate commerce. I've been 8 or 9 years on this. This is the time to get that done. It's in the bill. I just need help for it. So that's my little bit of lobbying to all of you. And then I want to say just a short little narrative, and we can go deeper into it if we've got time. But I was at a sidebar conversation with the president at a gathering sometime, I suppose it would have been in September. And he said, come see me, I want to talk to you. And so we dialed out the White House and said, the president wants this schedule set up. And we got a call from the White House that said, the president would like to see you on a Tuesday at 11:30 a.m. for a 30-minute meeting, hard stop at noon. And so, of course, I'm there at 11:30. And we went into the Oval Office. I brought in my chief of staff into the Oval Office, and she is, her name is Sarah Stevens, and don't anybody hire her. I want to keep her. But she's the youngest chief of staff on the Hill, and a little baby on top of it, and we're making all this work. But she came in with me and was very useful. But for that 30-minute meeting, we talked about E15, the first part of it. And I knew early in that meeting that we were going to get the E15 announcement that we received here on October 9th in Council Bluffs. And so I pushed further. I said, Mr. President, we don't want to create another blend wall at E15. We want to blow right on through that and go all the way to E20, E30, E50, E85, which is in my tank right now. And the president said, you'd go all the way to E90, wouldn't you? And I said, well, sure I would. But we need to have the choice. It's the consumers that need to have the choice, not the government tell us what our choice can be. And so at least we've got E15 coming at us. We know that. But I'm going to keep pushing to go beyond that. I'm not satisfied with that. So that's a number of things. Oh, I'll just touch one more thing. I won't go into the bills, but I offered up 3 bills to him. We talked about a whole series of them. That 30-minute meeting turned into 75 minutes, by the way, with Marine One sitting out there waiting to lift him off to where he was headed at noon. And but the 3 bills that I offered him, I called them automatic self-enacting pieces of legislation. That means that you don't have to hire enforcement to go out there and make it happen. It's going to be controlled by the provisions written in the bill, and it's going to bring about almost certain nearly universal compliance. And in one of them, I said, just put a bond on visa overstayers so that when they get a visa to come into America, they can just post their credit card and we'll release the hold on their credit card when they go back home again. And he looked at me and he said, I've heard of everything. I've heard of everything, but I never heard of that one. Where do you come up with these ideas? And I said, well, Mr. President, I come up with them in the morning in the shower. It's the only place I'm not interrupted. And that's pretty much how that went, but he endorsed all those bills and several others, including birthright citizenship, which you're hearing about in the news today. So a lot of the things that I've laid out for years are now on the cusp of reaching them as an accomplishment. That might be a good way to end this. And again, remind you, come out to Glen Oaks. Let's help them out there. This STEM organization is the Siouxland, Tanzania Education and Medical Ministries. And Dr. Steve Myers is close to a saint as anybody I know that's walking around out there with a shotgun in his hands hunting pheasants with me, as he was last Saturday. So thanks a lot, and I'm open to any kind of questions, comments. I usually say in lieu of silence criticism, but I think I'll withhold that given the political climate.
Sure.
You got it, Jim?
Yeah, I got it. Billy?
I'd like to go back in a few minutes in your comments when you're talking about helping Iowa State University. Public research is absolutely critical to growing not only science and technology in the state, but entrepreneurship. What have you done in the past and what can you do in the future to help access to research and development and also to help grow the entrepreneurs in the state?
Of course, those kind of things, there's quite a convoluted list of all of that. I support the research that goes for universities. We hardly ever get to do an earmark. We actually can't do earmarks anymore that will go directly to Iowa State. And so instead, we write provisions in that look like Iowa State can be competitive working in those. Now, one of those would be, that is in the Farm Bill, for example, would be the industry. We spent 2.5 years doing meetings, pulling together the Farm Bill just in the 4th District. And with those meetings all over the 4th District, we picked good opinion leaders to put them in the room. But one of the things that came out of that was the need for a vaccine for foot and mouth disease. It would destroy our livestock industry in this country if we don't have a vaccine ban. And the situation we have today, and so the industry was asking for it's, I better not put that number on if it's not certain in my memory, is quite expensive. I believe it's $150 million a year just to maintain the inventory of a foot and mouth disease vaccine. Plus, it takes startup money to another maybe 150 or 200 million. So we have to buy all that vaccine from either France or Uruguay. And so they were ready to do that, and they are doing that, and it is in the Farm Bill. But the thing that I noticed in the meetings we held out here at Iowa State, probably 5 meetings at least, I attended at least 3 of those at Iowa State. And out of that came something I really learned, which is we believe that science will produce a genetically modified vaccine that we can produce in America that could lift that dependency to France or Uruguay for a vaccine bank off of us, and we could produce a lot more doses of it, a lot faster, and a lot cheaper. And so what I was able to get in there was, I believe the number is a $20 million challenge grant for whoever can develop this vaccine so that in 3 to 5 years, we won't be dependent any longer on France or Uruguay. So that's one of the examples. But there are a lot of them, and when Iowa State comes in, they work with my staff. We just kind of drift that in there, the things that make sense. And I think they'll tell you that we've had a really good, I'll use the word here, partnership. Okay.
Yes.
In May 2016, you gave an interview with Pro English, and you explained that your grandmother, Frida, had been living in Iowa for more than 30 years, speaking only German. So I'm wondering, why are you pushing current immigrants to conduct all their business in English when your own family lived here for decades speaking a foreign language?
I don't know where they... Can you read for me what that says about my grandmother being here for 30 years not speaking English?
It says, my grandmother Frida came over from Germany, and I checked, it was March 26, 1894. She was 4 years old then.
Yeah.
She raised 6 sons and a daughter. My father was 3rd in line out of those 7. When he went to school on his first day of kindergarten, he was speaking only German, and it must have been very confusing for him to go to school that day. But when he came home and said hello to his mother in German, she turned to him and said, "Speaking German in this household is for you from now on verboten. I came here to be an American, and you will go to school and learn English, and you will bring it home, and you will teach it to me." But if she came to America in 1894 when she was 4 years old, she got married at age 29. When her 3rd child, Emmett, your father, was in kindergarten, she had been in America for at least 32 years. So according to your story...
I get it now.
Okay.
But I'm glad you read that story because I'm very proud of that story.
Yeah, you should be.
Yeah.
We all have that immigrant.
And my grandmother learned English, but she learned it from my father. And the way she learned it was she had no way to learn it except to say to her kids, go to learn English and bring it home and teach it to me. That's why I tell that story, because it's that important. She was so proud to be an American. She didn't like speaking German. She wanted to, she kept her German throughout her lifetime. And I knew her as an English-speaking grandmother with a German accent. But she was proud to be an American. She raised 7 children. And of those 7 children, the first 6 were boys. And the last one was my Aunt Elaine, a girl. But the oldest son was not old enough to serve. And of the 5 of those who were, 4 went back to fight against the fatherland, to put it in those words. My father went to the South Pacific for 2.5 years, and he came home weighing 96 pounds. She was a very patriotic, America-loving woman, and she raised her sons and her daughter to be Americans first and to be proud of it. And they paid a price, and my Uncle Everett was wounded at the Battle of the Bulge and nearly lost a leg and received a
that's
Bronze
the same
Star.
as my family's German background
Yeah.
as well. And my question is, then why are you passing these English-only laws demanding that immigrants currently speak English right away and conduct all their business in English? It seems hypocritical.
No, it isn't, because your description, your adjective is wrong. It's not English only. That's a pejorative term that's been created by the left. English is the official language of the state of Iowa and has been for years. It's only been litigated once, and that's when Chet Culver violated it, and I had to sue him. But other than that, it's not been litigated that I know of. We need to have a common language because a common language is the most powerful unifying force known to humanity throughout all of history. That is what that's about, and I believe in that. I think we disagree, but that's my conviction. And it doesn't reject anybody's language. It just says we need one common form of communications currency. I'll take another question.
Great.
Thank you. understand that Des Moines is not part of your district, but all of Iowa is influenced on your decisions and others. Our Des Moines Airport needs some renovations and expansions. What's your position on the airline passenger fee increase and funding for the airport?
You know, I haven't taken a position on it yet, but I'm happy to talk. And I would not take a position until I'm fully informed on this. And I think it's pretty clear there's nothing out there of any comments I've made anyway. I want to have good airline travel coming into the United States and into Iowa. Des Moines is the central hub. It's got to work. It's got to be good. This is the metropolitan center for the state of Iowa, and it's a metropolitan anchor for the 4th Congressional District. So I don't want to give any of that up. I kind of lean a little towards the National Guard, but there's a little friction there because we need them too. And but also I help and support some of the other airports like the Essential Air Service, Fort Dodge. If we don't have that in Fort Dodge doesn't grow. So I want to have a fine balance to this. There's limited resources, of course, and I want to see the whole picture. When I see that whole picture, then I'm happy to sit down sometime on my way in or out to have that conversation. Thank you.
Yep.
So, just a second. As I'm sure all of us have already heard, this Saturday there was a shooting at a synagogue in Pittsburgh that tragically left 11 people dead. And the terrorist who committed this crime, he was quoted as saying, "They bring invaders in that kill our people. I can't sit back and watch our people get slaughtered." You, Steve King, have been quoted as saying, "We can't restore our civilization with other people's babies." You and the shooter both share an ideology that is...
No, don't you do that.
Anti-immigration.
Do not associate me with that shooter. I knew you were an ambusher when you walked in the room, but there's no basis for that, and you get no question, and you get no answer. No, you're done. We don't play these games here in Iowa.
I was about to ask you what
No,
distinguishes
you're done.
your
You
guy.
crossed the line. It's not tolerable to accuse me to be associated with a guy that shot 11 people in Pittsburgh. I am a person who has stood with Israel from the beginning. The length of that nation is the length of my life. And I've been with them all along, and I will not answer your question. I'll not listen to another word from you.
If you don't have
And
a
this
right
is
to
over
live
if he
this
keeps
worldview,
talking.
then why did you travel to Austin?
This is over if
I
we
think-
don't stop talking.
Organization.
I think he's given his answer. I think that his answer is his answer. Yes,
But do
please.
you identify as a white?
Sir,
Stop it.
Sir,
Why did you meet with a white supremacist?
sir, that's it.
organization?
That's
You're
an
done.
answer.
I would ask whoever is
Yes.
guarding this door to lead this man out of the room.
I live and I work in the 4th District. My wife lives and works in the 4th District. My kids live and it's in school.
Let's wait till he gets out, and then I'll take your question, sir.
Sorry you couldn't answer
Stop
the
it.
question
Nobody's
without-
going to listen to you. You're gone. We don't behave like that in this country.
Something to get an insincere answer.
Go out and stand out front with a sign.
Your record on bills that you have co-sponsored or co-sponsors out there that's been talked about, we can use that to inform this question. Yesterday, Representative Steve Stivers condemned you. Yesterday, the Reagan Battalion endorsed Cohen. My question, as someone who lives or who votes in the 4th District, how, if you are reelected, how are you going to address your seemingly shrinking range of influence in Washington?
There's a question that I don't favor, but it was offered respectfully. Thank you. And first, I will say that Stiver's behavior has befuddled every Republican that I've talked to and everyone that I know, including our leadership. And what I have said about that, I put out in a tweet. That's going to be my total answer on Stivers until after the election. And after the election, that will be addressed. And you can be very confident.
If you could reiterate that, I'd appreciate it. I didn't see the tweet, your tweet statement of Stivers.
I would like to make sure that that tweet is verbatim, so I don't want to try to guess from memory. As I carefully put that together, I want to make sure people know. Jeff is pulling that up, and if he gets it. In the meantime, I want to tell you what this is all about. And I brought it in here in my hand. This is an article from the Washington Post dated October 25th of this year. And it is it's written by Mike DuBois. I brought it in as a copy, and I can read you what's on the front of this, and I can tell you it's all false. Headline, Representative King met with far-right Austrians on trip funded by Holocaust Memorial Group. That whole headline's false. Here's the first paragraph. Representative Steve King met with members of a far-right Austrian party with historical Nazi ties during a European trip financed by a Holocaust memorial group. All false. And I will tell you what really did happen. There's a group called, a Jewish group called From In the Depths, that they raise money primarily, I believe, from Jewish people around the country to take members of Congress and other people of influence over to see the Holocaust. I accepted that invitation. And my wife Marilyn and I went over there for a 3 or 4 day trip. We went through Auschwitz and Birkenau in particular, but also the museums and other places, especially in Warsaw. We did that with a survivor of the Holocaust, and his name is Eddie Mossberg from New Jersey, about 95 or 96 years old. And to walk through that place and hear from that man all of the things that he experienced and the stories that he knew, to see the grief on his face, to look at that vast expanse in Birkenau of the industrialized slaughter of a people that I do not understand why anyone would dislike any of them, is a stunning experience, and it would bring anybody back. It would jerk you up short. You can read this in the books, you can read it in newspapers, you can watch the movies, but when you stand on that ground and you walk up to the crematoriums and you listen to that with Eddie Mossberg and other Jewish people that are second, third generation, you understand what really happened over there. When that was done, the press will say also that I went back for a second look. I did. I went back with a couple of leaders who were Catholic Poles, and I heard it from their perspective. That was also useful. 3 million Jewish Poles were executed by the Nazis during that period of time going into and throughout the Second World War. Another 3 million, mostly Catholic, Protestant, mostly Catholic Poles, were also executed, many of them in the same place. Some of those pictures are on the wall. You can look in their eyes, and you can see their shaved heads, and you know what happened to them. And some of that hair is there, like a whole series of wigs of people that have been executed because of who they are. Maybe because of their religion, maybe because of their ethnicity. I abhor that as much as anybody does in this country. I went there despising what had happened. I walked away from there profoundly moved at what happened. And I saw it through the eyes of Eddie Mossberg, and I heard it from also a couple of leaders on the Catholic side of the Poles. And from there, I bought my own plane ticket, and I flew over to Vienna. And I had a meeting over there in Vienna. I was invited to sit down and talk to some business leaders. These business leaders were about 5 or 6 around the table. Only one of them I knew. He was the guy that invited me. And the rest of them around the table, they've been characterized as being Nazis or Nazi sympathizers or anti-Semites. Because it's alleged that they were members of the Freedom Party. Well, there was one member of the Freedom Party at that table, but the odds of that happening, if you pulled a business group here out of the Des Moines Area Partnership, 1 out of 6 is probably going to be a Republican. But 1 out of 6 of them was a Freedom Party member. And on top of that, when the meeting started, then I kind of learned a little bit about him. One of those fellas self-identified as Jewish. So around the table was one person of the Freedom Party, one person who said he was Jewish, and the others were, I'll say, random successful business people. But there was no meeting there with the people they allege had Nazi ties. But I want to tell you about those ties. At the end of the Second World War in Austria, if you were involved in government, you had Nazi ties. That was kind of like being part of the Ba'ath Party in Iraq at the time we went in there. And so the person that started the Freedom Party in 1956, he had been not only an officer in the SS, to be fair, but also he was the Minister of Agriculture for Austria. And they took him out of there in about 2 years, replaced him with another individual that had some ties that weren't very pretty either. And they began purging out of that party, and by 1967, everybody that had even any Nazi history, except for a little youthful affiliation with one of them, had been purged from the party. And they have lined themselves up to be against anti-Semites there. There's no party that's stronger pushing back against anti-Semites in Austria than the Freedom Party that's there. And so this whole story, it's like this. The entire fiasco that you've seen here in this state for the last 3 days or so is all based on the lies on this page right here that I've just soundly refuted. And now the whole thing collapses, and we find out how foolish everybody looks that takes the first bait and embraces it because you're of another political party, you want it to be true. But if you can't deal with truth, you've got no business wanting to run the government and no business wanting to elect somebody to office that can't tell you the truth. And so that is what happened. It's the straightest answer that can ever be delivered on this. I didn't come here planning on giving it, but it needs to be said on what happened. It was all out of my pocket. Nobody got duped to fly me over there. It had nothing to do with anything that is alleged in this entire article. It had to do with business interests that are there and people that wanted to know about the politics of the United States of America and gave me a polite invitation. And I won't tell you who they are because they don't deserve to be drugged through this either, but they're respectable people and leaders.
Okay. Thank you. Yes. Yeah.
Cheer me up now, Wade.
All right. Congressman, as you all know, President Trump is considering an executive order to change the 14th Amendment. Now, I'll use his language, quote, to remove the right to citizenship for babies of non-citizens and unauthorized immigrants born in U.S. soil. Well, I have two questions. One is, so what's your position as to whether either President Trump or any president can use an executive order to change an amendment under the Constitution? And then second, what's just your personal position on that, of what President Trump is advocating to remove citizenship for babies of non-citizens and unauthorized immigrants born in the U.S.
Okay. There's already stories out there that go beyond what he plans to do. And when I hear remove babies from citizenship, that implies that there are people born in America that are going to lose their citizenship over this executive order he's promised. And that, of course, wouldn't be true. It's prospective, not retrospective. First thing. Second is, I am the author of that legislation. I've introduced it in Congress. I'm the author of that legislation. I've introduced it in Congress since 2011. And I've held one or two hearings on birthright citizenship, and I brought in the best experts that we can find in the country who've listened to both sides of this. And so the Constitution does not need to be amended, in my view, and in the view of a number of the witnesses that we have had. The 14th Amendment of the Constitution was written to protect the babies that were born to newly freed slaves so that they would be citizens of the United States. And so that's the heritage of it. It was a Republican heritage, by the way, and they knew, and it was already happening in the South, they were trying to disenfranchise any of the babies that were born to the formerly freed slaves from being American citizens. We had all that whole series of Jim Crow laws that came about that time and after that. So this is designed to preempt it. And the language says that all persons born in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are American citizens. Well, that clause has to mean something. If it was just going to be all persons born in the United States, it just said so. So the clause, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof, that is a phrase that this whole thing turns on. And there are different opinions on this. But mine, after going deeply into this, is first of all, there's no Supreme Court decision that's on point on this. There's one called Wong Kim Ark from 1898 about a Chinese individual whose parents were both legally in the United States, and they wanted to deny him citizenship because they didn't want Chinese, is what I think happened in 1898. And the Supreme Court ruled that he was a citizen because his parents were both legally in the United States and that he was subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. But there's a fair amount of scholarship out there that says that if you come into America illegally, at the point you do an illegal crossing, then you lose this subject to your jurisdiction. You're still subject to the jurisdiction of wherever that legal barrier was at the border. And also there were Native American tribes that had their rules set up so that you couldn't have dual citizenship. You were either going to be a citizen of the nation, Indian nation, or a citizen of this nation. And so that's part of what that language is about too. And I've read through a lot of the debate that took place in Congress. I don't know if I read all of it, but there's a pretty good theme in there that says we don't want to be granting citizenship to diplomats, children of diplomats, the employees or the working of the diplomats. And but what's odd is, and we didn't have a lot of trouble with this until the last few decades, and then it became a practice. And this practice is just growing and growing and growing to the point now where we have somewhere, by testimony in Congress, somewhere between 340,000 and 750,000 babies born in America that both parents are illegal. If you notice in my legislation, if one parent is legal, that child is a citizen. So I support the president in this, I believe he has the executive authority to do this because the executive branch of government has just taken it on themselves to adopt a policy of granting automatic citizenship, and it's never been tested. They have that authority to do that, I believe. And it needs to be tested at the Supreme Court level, and it's not ever going to happen unless we start acting the other way on it. He'll make that happen. It'll get tested in the court level, and then I do think that we'll prevail, but 10 years ago, I thought I knew how the court would decide. Today, I don't think I do. Thanks, sir.
Mary?
Thank you.
Yes, Congressman, what will be your number one priority if you are reelected?
Well, even before I be sworn in, I want to get a farm bill done. That's the number one priority. And we want to do that in lame duck session. And then we've also advanced another, making our tax cuts permanent. I'm all for that. But I also, the ACE bills that I talked about with the president, the automatic self-enacting bills, and I won't go deeply into them, but the New Idea Act, which denies the deductibility of wages and benefits paid to illegals, that's an automatic self-enacting bill. It's really important. The one about bonding on our visas is important. The president's endorsed all these in the Oval Office directly to me and asked me to take this to his people with that endorsement. Third one is we've got to get this trade done. And I'll say the urgency of this on trade is probably makes it the one I have to work on the hardest. The farm bill is going to work its way along. It's a long ways along, but the trade is the one that needs a lot of help. And you'll remember that I brought the Taiwanese into this state. I've been twice to Taiwan. I took them all the way up to Hinton and back again because I wanted them to see horizon to horizon row crop production so they knew what we have for capabilities here. And that's not the only deal we've got going. We've got others going on that are going to help our trade. But in the center of this trade issue that we made some progress in, the center of it now is the Chinese piracy of U.S. intellectual property, somewhere between $250 billion a year and $600 billion a year. The president says $500 billion. I won't argue with him on that. We've got to fix it because they are taking all the brain power of America that they get their hands on and then reproducing it in China with cheap labor. How in the world will we keep up with that? And so what I have said is just put a duty on products coming from China in an amount equivalent to recover that loss, back charging for it, so to be charge them a tech fee. It's what our C-Corp companies would know about. And then that will encourage the Chinese to diminish their IP piracy. And if that issue can be resolved, then I think the rest of the negotiations go pretty well. But I'm really getting more and more involved in trade because I have done a lot of world travel, and I've dealt with a lot of the leadership, and I've been trying to crack into Europe for a long time. And they have been a trade protection citadel. But now we have that opening. John-Paul Juncker came in and met with the president about 6 weeks ago, and his lead guy said to Larry Kudlow, we want to buy your soybeans and your beef and liquefied natural gas. We're going to waive regulations to do it. That's 500 million people in Europe, a market that we could get into. We've got the UK as another one we can do pretty easy. We're working with Japan. So I'll say intense trade. Let's get this thing done. The quicker we get it done, the quicker we can start to recover from this hole we have. And it's especially hurting our young farmers that are highly leveraged. Thanks.
Yes.
Congressman, in 2017, we introduced a bill that would eliminate the visa category that provides lawful permanent residence to foreign nationals who invest in commercial enterprise in the United States and create jobs. This spring, you introduced a bill that would make Hungarian nationals eligible to enter the United States as non-immigrant traders and investors if Hungary provides reciprocal treatment. So I guess I was just wondering, why Hungary, and does Hungarian investment disproportionately benefit the people of Iowa, people of the 4th District in comparison to other countries?
Well, it's pretty clear that the EB-5 visas, which those, if you come with enough capital, you qualify for an EB-5. It's been abused in this country. It's been abused in this state, and not very far away from here. And I don't want to get into those details, but that's what that is driven by. And in the Hungarian piece, it's just a matter of, it's a different kind of a visa, and it's a matter of conforming it with. If you notice also, I drove the legislation for New Zealand. They have been let out on the same category. I'm glad you know these things. And they have been left out of that investment loop on the same category. So I helped the New Zealand issue because they have been unjustly treated as far as abroad is concerned. And Hungary is exactly the same category. So I wanted that to conform. But the EB-5 has been abused, and we have people that are using it just as a means to buy citizenship in the United States. And And I think when you go deeper into that, you'll see that that's been happening in a way that should not be tolerated. I believe Chuck Grassley agrees with me. He may not be as vocal, but I think he agrees with me. And by the way, I put a plug in for that guy. There's never been another one in Iowa like Chuck Grassley. He is, the longer I work with him, the more I know him, the more I respect him, and the better I like him. He has really done a great job for America, and especially as chairman of the Judiciary Committee, and only if he is just a farmer. So.
Yes.
So not entirely relevant to your current slate of topics, but still important nonetheless. 64,000 Iowans, or 5.7 million Americans, are living with Alzheimer's, increasing our burden to our caregivers and healthcare system. So I was just curious if you would consider co-sponsoring the BOLD Act or supporting other pieces of legislation that address Alzheimer's as a chronic public health issue.
Okay, well, thanks. I missed part of that, as you can probably tell, but I heard Alzheimer's.
Yes.
And so you'll know that I've met with Alzheimer's advocates for a number of years now. And they've long said we need to have research done so that there can be relief. And I think we all agree with that. Iowa may be the most senior state in the nation. And I have represented, remember the old 5th district, we had, if Iowa had the highest percentage of our population over the age of 85, that's one of the numbers that we consistently hear. And I had 10 of the 12 most senior counties at the time. I probably had the most senior congressional district in America. But the Alzheimer's research, when I first started asking those questions, advocates would come in for relief for Alzheimer's, and I would listen to all that they had to say. And the stories are sad, and we all know that. A lot of us have people that have experienced this as family members. But I began to ask, what about cure? What about treatment? What are the solutions to this? And the first 2 or 3 years, I didn't hear anything about solutions. Now I'm starting to hear we've got some insights into bringing in perhaps a cure or a treatment for Alzheimer's. And so I'm going to continue to support those efforts. America has led the world in disease cure for a long time, probably over 100 years. And I want to maintain that, but especially because I represent the people that are most likely to be afflicted by Alzheimer's. But I need to know the details on the bills before I can endorse them for or not. And I welcome you always to sit down out there in D.C. or here in Iowa, wherever is convenient. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we can turn to closing comments, Congressman, if you like.
I get those. Okay. Well, first, I regret that this meeting did what it did, but I know from more experience than most that you have to address that right away. And I've had that tried on me a number of times. So I don't use that to paint the rest of the people in this room. We got the people out that didn't need to be here. And they came here to do exactly what they did. So setting that aside, I'd say instead, looking back over these years, this privilege of serving in the Iowa Senate for 6 years was a joy of my life. And this privilege of serving in the United States House of Representatives also is a joy of my life. And the cycle out there is we're generally 3 weeks in session, then a week to go back home and do our work, and then back to 3 weeks in session. And so when I go there and it's all fresh and friendly faces and you start working together, and when you start working together, and then we quickly get to the things we agree on, and then we start to work on the things we don't quite agree on. Start working out those details. And as you work out those details, you're trying to leverage your other members, Democrats and Republicans. And over that 3-week period of time, the tension goes up, the frustration goes up, and I'm like this pulling my hair out thinking, if I could just see it my way, we'd have this thing done. And then at the end of that time, I go to the airport, fly back home, and I spend that week out among constituents who are the best in the world, by the way, not taking anything away from anybody else's. We have the best place in the world to live and raise in a family. It's a matter of record, but it's a matter of experience, too. We know that, and we're going to keep it that way. I spend time out there with people. I spend time with my family. We go to church together on Sunday, and we're all within 10 miles of each other. Then we go out to one of those houses of my wonderful 3 daughters-in-law, or my wife's place, my place, and we cook up a brunch and sit around for a few hours. And when the grandkids start to fight over the rope swing in the maple tree in front of my house, and Megan sets the timer so that they have to share, I know everything is right with the world. And then, next morning, I get on the plane, fly back out to Washington, walk out on the floor of the House of Representatives, 435 people there that have been off to see their families and see their constituents. I look out across that and I think, I really do like all these people after all. And the cycle starts all over again. That's really what that's like for me. And I have learned a lot. You couldn't ask for a job. It was more of a powerful learning experience than it is to serve in the United States Congress. The information that comes to me comes to me all day, every day, formatted in a way it's designed for me to learn it and get it. And I've got great staff. I have the youngest chief of staff on the Hill. My LD, Sue Ann Edmiston, is just terrific, quick as can be. We've got a legacy of people that have rotated out of my office, and they're scattered around the district and the state, and they're serving you. A lot of you don't know their names, but they're serving you. And I talked to someone this morning on the phone. So what we've laid out here is this: a good network to all, not only all 39 counties, but I personally have been to all 382 towns. My staff goes to all 382 towns every year at least once, and they make new contacts every time because we want the roots to go out and down. We don't sit in our office and wait for somebody to come open the door and deal with the problem. We go out and address it in that way. And so when I look at all that's been accomplished here, not much bold was going to happen in the right direction, in my view, while we had Nancy Pelosi as the Speaker or Barack Obama as President. But you never heard me say a thing of personal criticism. Policy criticism of Barack Obama, yes, but not personal. I never had a personal objection with the man, and he's treated me well, face to face. So I appreciate that, but there are two ideologies that are competing here and on out to the election. You all know what mine is. I don't have to remind you all that. But a lot of this legislation that I've laid down more than 10 years ago is now poised to move forward and become law, because we're out of that desert, as I would call it, and into this time of opportunity. And so I've worked a lifetime to get in this position. My relationships with the president are as good as they could possibly be. And he listens to me, and I listen to him, and we work together. And my relationships with other members, which I don't know that I answered that completely in your question, sir, but it's a lot better than the news media would have you say. They call me and offer support, and they're eager to work. I chair the Conservative Opportunity Society. That was established back in 1983 by Newt Gingrich and others. I inherited that gavel after I'd been there about 2 years. Mostly it's not held that long, but I had so many things to do, and I didn't find the right person, so I keep chairing that. Every Wednesday morning at 8 o'clock, I bring in keynote speakers, top-line speakers, to deliver to a group of about 24 solid people. That list would be people like Justice Antonin Scalia, and people like Dick Cheney, and General Petraeus, and Laura Ingraham and Sean Hannity, a number of others. Every Wednesday, somebody along that path. So my leverage in there is quiet. And once the Attorney General said that he'd never seen anybody get so much done and get so little credit. I didn't think much about that when they told me he said that. Now I believe him, because I've listened to this campaign like the rest of you are. But you know the job I've done. Let's deal with facts. Let's not deal with these falsehoods that are here. Anybody can go pull up this story and take a look at it and know the front page is false. Every word of it is false. And everything is built upon this false page right here. If you pull it out, everything collapses and it goes back to the truth. By the way, you look at a man that's been at this for over 60 years and this living in the state, why wouldn't you know this ahead of them? Why don't the people that know me, why don't the people who are my friends, why don't they say these things that these people from the West Coast or the East Coast that come here to gin up these stories and write? So I leave that on you as you write about this. And some of the press is real good, and a whole bunch of them are in that other side. I'm not going to use those words today, and the people that are here that I've worked with know how much I appreciate what we've done. We've got good personal relationships with people in the press here in Iowa. It isn't all, not all the press, but some of them. And I appreciate we can't do our job unless we have a free press. And I fear that this press and this cyberbullying that goes on is threatening our First Amendment. So let's go get this done next Tuesday. Let's reflect Iowa values in the ballot box. And then if you've got issues that you want me to push on, you know the framework of my convictions. They haven't changed. They haven't changed in 22 years in public life. They're not going to change. And I still have a lot of energy, a lot of conviction. I've got a whole bag of things that are poised to move through and get to the
signature.